What's up, everybody? So, as we mentioned, we are going to try and restart the Dissident Film Club project next year. And we decided to do a few little test episodes, little test segments, and put them out as patron only segments here. So, we're hoping to sort of debut this as a subset of the main show to still be on the same channel and everything in January. But we're going to mess around with some graphics and some backgrounds and some logos and things like that, give it a slightly different look from the main show just to sort of differentiate it. We're here recording this on the last day of November, which means that the holiday movie season has kicked off, and we did some dissident horror films, and so we thought we'd each give a brief take on a dissident Christmas film to kick off this test run of episodes. So Russell actually wrote a piece last year about how America is Pottersville. And he talked about, how we have sort of gone down the wrong sort of parallel universe.
There was a very bright, optimistic vision of America at that time, and particularly in the work of Frank Capra, who himself was an immigrant. He had a very, very strong belief in the American ideal and the principles of the country and the country as the land of opportunity. And I'm sure everybody's seen it. I'm assuming everybody's seen it. So George Bailey at his wit's end because he's running an honest kind of savings and loan, and his uncle loses their money by accident. Turns out it was stolen by Mr. Potter, and they're going to go to jail, and all these workers in the town he supported are going to lose everything, and his name's going to get dragged through the mud. So he's going to kill himself, and an angel shows him what the world would have been like without him. And he shows him that it's because of George Bailey that the evil capitalist Mr. Potter didn't completely overrun the town and turn it into what his vision of the town would be. And his vision of the town is basically the America we live in today. It was well observed sociologically, I think, because what you see there is the core principle of the Tao Te Ching. The Tao Te Ching is actually written as a book of politics. It's actually a political treatise. It's been considered a book of philosophy and Zen, but it was actually written as advice to the emperor on how to govern. And the core premise that it comes back to over and over again is that the people reflect the way they're being governed. That if the government lies, the people will lie. If the government steals, the people will steal. And that's very much what you see in It's a Wonderful Life. You see these people who were perfectly nice, decent people in the Bedford Falls that had a George Bailey to keep them away from Mr. Potter. But in this reality, a lot of those people who are very decent in that timeline are very cynical, callous, cruel kind of people in Pottersville because that's what their environment has made them. That's what that is made of them. And that's where we are. Pottersville is a place where every man for himself, every man and woman for themselves, everybody, just everybody trying to make a buck, nobody really caring about anyone else or taking care of their neighbor, caring about their neighbor. That's where we are. Mr. Potter won. We're living in the reality where there is no George Bailey. George
Right,
Bailey
all the would-be George Baileys actually did get whacked. JFK could have been a George Bailey. Martin Luther King could have been a George Bailey. Fred Hampton could have been a George Bailey. Right? Boom, boom, boom.
Do not ask what you can do, what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
I mean, when you think about it, that really was a turning point. I mean, JFK probably would have scaled back. I mean, you might not have had a Cold War rage on for as long as it did, as brutally as it did, without him being whacked, right? I mean, the escalation of Vietnam.
Well, he wanted to end Vietnam.
Yeah, he wanted to end Vietnam. And Vietnam was really there were a lot of people who argue that the Berlin Wall wouldn't have fallen had we not gone to Vietnam, even though we lost that war. I've heard people argue that us showing we were willing to put ourselves and the world through such hell in Vietnam was what
I've
sort of
heard that
created the
argument.
impression that we might do this again. This isn't going to stop unless the Soviet Union folds, right? Unless communism folds. I'm not saying I agree with that, but I've heard that. And that would, like I said, I mean, there is a certain amount of sense that makes. And I think that's obviously for the worse. And definitely for the worse in terms of the way things unfolded here. Because that ethos of JFK, patrons know we just played a segment of JFK, the things he would talk about quite regularly, about real corporate responsibility, about real civic duty, anti-greed, anti-selfishness, anti-rapaciousness. All those ethics are completely out the window to the point where now your president won't even fight to get railroad workers a week's worth of sick leave. When that poses the slightest inconvenience to him and to his party, workers right under the bus, right under the bus. Don't even think about leaning on the corporations themselves and saying, hey, pay up, give them a week off. What are you, crazy? No.
Well, and he's framing it as he's saving the American economy and other workers who are going to be impacted. But he never tells you that given that they're imposing this contract, they could impose a better contract.
Right. Exactly.
They could do that, but he doesn't mention that.
Yep.
No, we are not really a society anymore. We are that's what It's a Wonderful Life is about. It's the best version of America and the worst version of America. That's really what the world with and without George Bailey is. It was Capra. I mean, it's interesting. Capra obviously was very, very enamored of his adopted country. But he wasn't naive about its corruption. That's a running theme in his work. Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. It assumes this corrupt power that actually runs Washington. His vision was hopeful because he believed that Jimmy Stewart would always prevail at the end, that the people united cannot be defeated. That I would, if you had to sum up a theme of Frank Capra's body of work, it would be that, right? It was not that there were not problems in America. It was not that there was not deep corruption. It was that the American people are essentially decent. And if they stand up against those powers, they can triumph. And
right. And it was very conscious of people's efforts to demoralize people out of that kind of action, right? Out of that collective action. Like we have to keep our spirits, because there is not just an effort to break us physically, break us materially, but break us socially, right? Break our bonds between each other. And when we resist that, we win. When we don't, we lose.
You think I'm licked, see? Well, I'm not licked.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Yeah, it's it plays very differently for me now when I watch It's a Wonderful Life. And when you look at a lot of those Christmas movies, which, I mean, the old school ones like that, and even a lot of the ones they're still making. It's these Christmas movies are perpetually set in America circa 1935. Right. It's these very small towns, snowy landscape.
Even now, right. Yeah.
Even now.
The ones that are
town
made on
main streets.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Yeah. I just watched one. My wife just watched one with the guy from This Is Us. I don't recall his name. It's on Netflix. But yeah, same thing. Like all of the political realities at the time are just memory hold. And that's part of the charm. That's part of what Christmas is. Christmas is timeless, right? That's why the ornaments are cool. They're still wooden ornaments with the hooks in them. There's something very analog about Christmas, and that's part of the charm of it.
That's
There's something very retro about it.
There is, and all of these movies play to that, but increasingly that is detached from our current reality. We're having a big debate today about the legacy of our culture. And I think something that people, I don't know, they have very unrealistic expectations of human history. Any civilization that has achieved greatness or prosperity had a central myth of itself. And that myth was never all-encompassing reality of that society. But in the absence of it, societies fall apart. Societies are as held together by a common self-image as they are by a functioning economy. And today we have neither.